I know. It was very good.
Oh no, y'all keep talking. I'm not ready for you yet. All right, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, who in the Paschal mystery established the new covenant of reconciliation, grant that all who have been reborn into the fellowship of Christ's body may show forth in their lives what they profess by their faith. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. All right, y'all come on in. As always, everyone has left the front row open for you. So what I want to talk about this morning, as we're making our way, really getting into the short rows of the year of the Bible, we've landed, we've gone through the Gospels, we've landed in John this week. And so you notice that all of our scripture readings this morning were from the Gospel according to John. So I want to talk about John, and there's this one idea that I've always kind of loved, and I want to share it with you because John's Gospel is a unique Gospel. And so what I want to talk about today is the resurrected Jesus, the new ark of the new covenant. So John's Gospel, like I said, is different from the other Gospels. Somebody shout out a number. How many total Gospels do we have in the Bible? Four. There are other Gospels, what we call Gnostic Gospels. They were left out for a reason. There was a time in the kind of 80s, 90s when people got really excited about the Gnostic Gospels, and there was all this talk of, oh, well, the bigwigs must have kept them out for a reason, and they're hiding this knowledge from us. They were kept out for a reason because the theology is not sound. And so there's a reason why they were not kept in. John's Gospel, however, was kept in, but it's really, really different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's ostensibly by John, the beloved disciple. You'll notice in John's Gospel that the writer of the gospel will sometimes refer to somebody as the beloved disciple. On Easter Sunday last week, when I was talking about the great Easter run, Mary goes and tells the guys, hey, the body's gone. Two disciples go running to go see for themselves. One of those is Peter. The other is named the beloved disciple. The writer is very sure to make sure that you know that the beloved disciple made it there first, that he was young and spry and athletic, and poor Peter is wheezing on his way there. And there are a couple other instances, like at the Last Supper, the beloved disciple reclines on Jesus and places his head on his chest and rests against Jesus. The beloved disciple is also the one that Jesus, hanging on the cross, looks at Mary and looks at the beloved disciple and says, this is now your mother, this is now your son. We believe this to be John, and we believe that John is the one who wrote this gospel. It's always tricky, though, to pin down for certain who wrote what. You can look at some of Paul's epistles, and it's very clear as you compare the vocabulary and the syntax that some of them were written by somebody else, though they claim to be by Paul. This was a thing that happened a good bit back then. It's not forgery. They're not trying to lie. It's that disciples of the person would claim that person's name, and they're writing in the spirit of that person. So I prefer to think that the beloved disciple, John, really did write this gospel, but it may have been someone who followed him and knew him and heard those stories. It is interesting that the timeline's a little wonky. It's way different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so you might ask, well, why would John have gotten those details wrong? Well, it might have been because he wrote it when he was older. It might also be because it's somebody else finally writing down the stories that he told. We believe that it was written about circa 90 to 100 AD, or AD 90 to 100. Thank you, Mother Leslie, God bless you. She is turning on the air because I am filling the place with hot air already. So that means it's one of the latest, and of the four Gospels that we have in the Bible, it is the latest to be written. You want to see a big difference, go look at Mark. We think Mark is the earliest one written, and we think John is the latest. Mark is super speedy, it's short, it's abbreviated. He even leaves verbs out and stuff. He's kind of famous in the Gospel of Mark for starting his with the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. Like, he doesn't have time to even say this is. And that's because things are early in the life of the church. They're being persecuted. This is a gospel written on the run for Christians who are on the run. But by the time we get to John, John is sort of settled in. He's an old fella. Things are kind of moving along. There's still persecution happening. But if you read John's gospel compared to Mark, it's got all this flowery language and just keeps going and going and going with all this poetry and metaphor. So he's had the most time to think about the story of Jesus and the most time to really just ramp up the writing and make it beautiful. It's non-synoptic. Can anybody tell me what the word synoptic means? When I say synoptic gospels.
It's correlation with one another and they have interconnection.
Perfect. Correlated with one another, connected with one another. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you can look at, and they have pretty much the same stories, not all in the same order, sometimes a little fudge here and there to kind of wiggle things around. In my office, I have a book that takes all three of those gospels and puts them in 3 columns on each page, showing you how they all correlate to one another. You can't do that with the Gospel of John. It's its whole own weird beast. It does not have Jesus's parables. It has a ton of his miracles. And instead of teaching in parables the way that he does in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in John, he just kind of does a whole lot of his teaching in what we call the farewell discourse. If you've ever read the story of the Last Supper and kind of the events around it, Jesus goes on for chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter. And it's all that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, and I hope that you'll be in me as the Father is in me, and we'll all be in the Father and the Father is in us. And it just keeps going and going and going. That's how Jesus seems to teach in John's gospel. John's gospel is deeply theological, deeply mystical, and deeply symbolic. Mark doesn't have time for symbolism. John is dripping with symbolism. There's also, some of y'all asked me a while back, like in Mark's gospel, Jesus will always say, like he'll do a miracle and then he'll say, but don't tell anybody it was me. Don't tell anybody it was me. And some of you have come and said, why would he do that? Wouldn't he want the word to get out about him? This is what we call the messianic secret. Throughout so much of, especially Mark's gospel, but also in others, he's saying, don't let the cat out of the bag. Don't tell people that it was me. And the reason for that, we believe, is because his greatest miracle had not yet happened yet. And that miracle was going to be his crucifixion, death, and resurrection. He did not want people to just know that he was the miracle man who could provide you with plenty of lunch and an easy healing. Those were all supposed to be signs pointing to the greater miracle, which is his resurrection. And so he's always asking them to keep the messianic secret. But in John, cat's out of the bag from the very first chapter. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and we have seen him. His name is Jesus. And so John doesn't play around with any secrets. He's like, Jesus is God, y'all. And so we're going to talk about him like he's God. And that's John's whole approach to his gospel. You see some of that. You see some of the the Messiah-ness, the Christness, the Godness of Jesus all throughout John's gospel. And one of those ways that you see it is in what we call the I am statements. Where else in the Bible is there a famous I am that gets said? Yes.
Moses and the burning bush.
Moses and the burning bush, exactly. So the very first time that God ever reveals God's name to humanity full on is when Moses is out tending the sheep. He sees something, he's curious, he goes, he looks. It's a bush that is engulfed in flames, but is not being consumed. God communicates to Moses through that bush. It's the big moment of, I need you to go rescue my people from Pharaoh. And when Moses says, well, who shall I say has sent me? God says, I am that I am, Yahweh. So whenever you look in the Old Testament, wherever you see Lord capitalized, you ever notice that there are places where it's capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D? That is our English little drop-in for Yahweh. That is, I am. So every time you read that, and it says, and the Lord said unto Abraham, or the Lord said unto Elijah, what it's actually saying is, Yahweh said unto Elijah, I am said unto Elijah. And it makes me a little sad that we don't still call God I am. I just think that we'd be formed by that in an important way if you and I talked about God as the I am or I am. Well, Jesus uses in John's gospel all of these I am phrases. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and life. I am the way and the truth and the life. I am the vine. This is not a mistake, and this is not just mere coincidence. Jesus in John's gospel is not just making these declarative statements for fun. He is taking the language of Yahweh. I am, I am, I am. He's revealing more and more of who God is, and in some way taking on that I am for himself. So that's one way that John sort of goes ahead and puts Jesus in the same realm as God, without any question of, is he just a man? No, there is something divine and special about him. Then there is the story that we typically hear on the second Sunday of Easter, the story of doubting Thomas. And this piece of art is my favorite depiction of it. I'm a sucker for Caravaggio always because of his use of light and dark. But here you have Thomas playing his finger in Jesus' side and the others sort of looking on, and the amazement on his face, and Jesus saying, yeah, there it is. Or what do you think he's thinking there? Who knows? There he is with his wounds still there, and Thomas said, I won't believe until I can see them, touch them, place my finger in the wound in his side. And so Jesus allows that. And notice that's Jesus's hand there, because you can see the nail mark there. He has his hand on Thomas's hand. He's saying, here, come and look. Unless he's saying, boy, get out of there. But I don't think he's saying, I think he's inviting him and allowing that to happen. Does anybody remember what Thomas declares, what just blurts out of his mouth when he sees this? Malachi?
My Lord and my God.
My Lord and my God. That's right. At my last church, sweet Sheila O'Neill, who was the head of the Knitters Guild, she would make you a prayer shawl just like that, called it a hug from Jesus. We give those out, and I just love to give people a hug from Jesus. Sheila had a Catholic background, and one Holy Week in our little chapel, in that chapel, the altar faced the wall, and so I had to do Eucharist facing this way with everybody behind me. And one Holy Week, I raise up the bread and say, this is my body, yada, yada, remembrance of me. and I hear this whisper out in the congregation. And then I do the same with the wine. This is my blood, yada, yada, remembrance of me. And I hear this whisper, and through Holy Week, she got bolder and bolder, or my hearing got better and better. And she was saying, and I think this is a Catholic practice, when I would elevate those elements, she would say, "My Lord and my God." And she meant it every time. Holding up that bread, holding up that wine, "My Lord and my God." This declaration that Thomas makes is massive. He's not just saying, "My Lord and my teacher, my rabbi and my friend." He's saying, "Holy smokes, okay, the game has changed. My Lord and my God." So in John's gospel, John is always trying to get us to see Jesus is not just an average Joe. Jesus is the incarnate God. Roger, do you remember?
We have a Catholic priest in this city who says that during the consecration prayer. He says it every time. Father Chapman at Michael and all.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Father Chapman.
And second of all, in the Zoom's Bible study this week, we noted that the passage never says what we're painted there. It never states that Thomas actually touched or put his hand on Jesus.
Interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, I've thought about that the whole week. I don't know what that means.
It means Caravaggio took some license. Yeah. Well, and so even greater then is the point that he sees it, he beholds it, and without even having to touch it would say, "My Lord and my God." When then Jesus says, "Well, blessed are you who got to see it, but even more blessed are all of y'all to come who will not have seen or touched or felt, but believe." But you're right, Father Hugh, Father Chapman over at St. Michael and All Angels, he is on the more Anglo-Catholic side of the Episcopal piety spectrum, and you're right, he's "my Lord and my God" every time. So that's the setup. I wanted you to know all that stuff about John's gospel and his approach. For him, Jesus, God intertwined. Jesus is the full incarnation of God. So now I'm going to kind of do something a little unexpected. Let's go off the beaten John path. Does anybody know the adjective form of John? Johannine. Yes, you've got Markan, Lucan, Matthean, I think, and then Johannine. See, these are things you need to know when you get on Jeopardy. You're welcome. So we're going to go off the Johannine trail, and I'm gonna share with you all one of my favorite aspects of the resurrection story that's found in John. But to do that, we got to go hitch a ride with Moses and the Israelites in Exodus. Can I have someone with good stamina? It's going to be more than one slide. Read this for us. Brian, are you? Yeah. Okay, Brian, go for it.
Make sure my hair is good for it too. Have them make an acacia wood chest. It should be 45 inches long, 27 inches wide, and 27 inches high. Cover it with pure gold, inside and out, and make a gold molding all around it. Cast 4 gold rings for it, and put them on its 4 feet, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Make acacia wood poles and cover them with gold. Then put the poles into the rings on the chest sides and use them to carry the chest. The poles should stay in the chest's rings. They shouldn't be taken out of them. Put the covenant document that I will give you into the chest.
Keep going, brother.
Oh, did it change? Oh, then make a cover of pure gold, 45 inches long and 27 inches wide. Make 2 winged heavenly creatures of hammered gold, 1 for each end of the cover. Put 1 winged heavenly creature at one end and 1 winged heavenly creature at the other. Place the winged heavenly creatures at the cover's 2 ends. The heavenly creatures should have their wings spread out above, shielding the cover with their wings. The winged heavenly creatures should face each other toward the cover's center. Put the gold cover on top of the chest and put the covenant document that I will give you inside the chest.
One more, you're nearly there.
There, I will meet with you. From there above the cover, from between the two winged heavenly creatures that are on top of the chest containing the covenant, I will deliver to you all that I command you concerning the Israelites.
Thank you, Brian. Very nice. Everybody clap at Brian. It's a very silly way to put that. It's from The Office, just so you know. Everybody clap at Phyllis. So in so much of the early Old Testament, especially Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, we get caught up in these directions that God is giving. So now I want you to make this, and you got to do it exactly like this and this and this. Make the tent, use these threads, make the priest vestments, make sure you sew in this. All of it is symbolic, all of it means something, and it's super easy to just yawn as we go through that. Who wanted to yawn while Brian was reading? Not because of Brian's reading. Brian wanted to yawn during that reading because, I mean, it's schematics. It's God laying out blueprints, and that's not a good time. But it gets to be a good time once you begin to realize what it is that God is doing with all of this. And so these are the instructions for what we would call the Ark of the Covenant. God has given them these tablets of the Ten Commandments. They are central to who the Israelites are. They are still a nomadic group. They're still going around all over the place. And so God has given them instructions for building not a temple, but a tent upon which the later temple will be based, but also giving them this ark, this cabinet, this tabernacle in which they can place the tablets, and they have these poles so that they can carry them along. This thing is super, super sacred. There are even stories where some people, I think one guy, I think his name was Uzzah, if I'm remembering correctly, somebody was about to drop the Ark of the Covenant, and he went up and pushed up against it to keep it from falling. Thought he was doing a favor. Shannon, you are shaking your head. You know what happened to him? What happened to him? God zapped him. He said, don't touch my ark. And so this thing is super sacred. And if we had the time, this would be the moment where I would give you all in little groups a piece of paper like newsprint and ask you to draw out what you think this looks like. We don't have time for that. So here's one that I yanked off the interwebs. So we think this is maybe what the Ark of the Covenant might have looked like. And I've just always been super intrigued by the top of it. Now, this is the box in which the Ten Commandments go. There are also some other things added later. They add a jar of manna that they keep in there forever, a few other things. But the top has always really intrigued me. And sometimes you see a little more space between their wings. And there are different ways to represent those two angels. But you've got angel here, and nothing here. This is what came in time to be known as the mercy seat. God says, I will meet with you between the cherubim. You've heard the phrase, seated between the cherubim, as is in heaven, he is here. This is basically God's throne with the Israelites. And ultimately, it gets put inside the Holy of Holies. And anytime the high priest go in there and meet with God, it was so sacred a space that they would tie a rope around his waist so that if he died in there, they could pull him out without having to go in after him. That's how serious all this stuff was. The thing that I want to point out here is this space in between. So if you look at this thing, you've got idol here with wings stretching forth. You have idol here with wings stretching forth. Can anybody remember what the second commandment is?
Graven image.
Yeah, no graven images. And so God has specifically instructed them that his throne ought to have graven images on it. Is God in this graven image right here? Is God in this graven image right here? No. Where is God's spot? In the center between the cherubim. This was such a huge departure from Middle Eastern religion and theology. most of the neighboring peoples would show their God displayed in some sort of idol form. Instead, the God of Hebrews, Yahweh, the great I am, who is that he is, who contains all things and is all things, yet who cannot be contained, said, I want you to build a seat, put an idol here, put an idol here. I will not sit there. I am the God who cannot be contained. I am the God who takes up the middle space in between. I have goosebumps right now. I don't know about y'all, but I literally do. It's the space between that the uncontainable God occupies. And so a lot of people miss that when they hear about the tabernacle. Questions about that before I move on, because I'm about to take it to Jesus now. Yeah, Jeff.
So we had a little discussion really quickly. Are
I
those
saw it.
aftermarket poles because they're supposed to be covered in gold?
Well, are they what kind of poles did you say? Aftermarket poles, yeah. Well, maybe they realized that the electricity of God was conducting through the gold poles and that this is some person's representation on the internet that I just yanked right off. There's a lot of really tacky, ugly representations of this thing. So this is the best I could get. But yeah, good catch. Other deep theological questions? Yes, Roger.
I just want to point out that there are a certain group of Christians who know where this is.
Yeah.
And they're the Ethiopian Copts. But according to that branch of Christianity, the Ark of the Covenant is somewhere in Ethiopia.
Okay.
I don't think anybody knows exactly where, but that's a basic tenet of their
Interesting.
Christianity.
Okay, I'll have something to say about that in just a minute. All right, so now let's go all the way from wandering in the wilderness with Moses to Easter Sunday, to the resurrected Jesus. I'm going to need another volunteer with stamina to read this part of the gospel from last week. Who will read for us? Please, Felicia.
But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni?"
Perfect, good enough.
Okay. Which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her.
Very good. Thank you, Felicia. Everybody clap at Felicia. So very often, if Easter sermons focus on this reading, they will often focus on, this whole part of the recognition of Jesus and Mary and the whole Rabboni, whatever, and Jesus saying her name. And my sermon last week focused on them running back and her hearing her name from him and that recognition in the name. And so it's really, really easy to slide right over some people who seem to be secondary characters. This part, though, is really important. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying. Where? One at the head and the other at the feet. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I like goosebumps.
So, yeah. I have to tell you, I have had this thought and forgotten this thought every single Easter. And this thought is not original to me, but when I'm hearing the gospel, I'll think, oh, and I think I got to remember that for next year, and then I never remember it for next year, and so you're getting it today. This is Easter Sermon 2.0. But last Sunday, as Deacon Linda was reading this gospel, I thought, oh, and Leslie, did I even lean over and say something to you? Yeah. So as tacky as the art is online for the Ark of the Covenant, the art for this moment is even tackier, and I couldn't find anything quite like I wanted it to look like. But this one, I wanted one where you could see like the tomb and angel here and angel here, but here we get kind of a 3/4 view. And there's Mary looking in saying, no, and they're saying what they're saying. So I won't belabor it. You see the parallel. So somebody talk to me, what does this mean about who Jesus is? Then pull these symbols together. You've got this, and you've got this. And the God who could not be contained. And then you've got this on the morning of his resurrection.
The same representation, we have the golden angels on the ark, and then we have these angels with, we're not seeing the space between them, but as you said, there's space between them, one at the head, one foot. So you've been saying all morning, Jesus is God, God is Jesus. They were together before the creation of the world. So I think what you're saying is the same thing. Jesus is God. Jesus is God.
Yeah, A plus, yeah, Kyle.
The tomb could not contain Jesus.
Bazinga. The tomb could not contain Jesus. The same God who could not be contained cannot even be contained by death. Jesus could not be contained by death.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Megan, and then we'll go
I
over
was just
here.
thinking that where Jesus' body was what the mercy seat was. So his body is the mercy seat.
So, did everybody hear that? It's as though Jesus's body is the mercy seat. Jesus himself is the mercy seat, which is, Roger, where I would go with our Ethiopian Coptic friends. If they have it, cool. I really would love to see it, and it really does matter, and that would be important. I think for all Christians everywhere, holding the understanding that Jesus is now the full representation of the mercy seat. Jesus is the full representation of the Ark of the Covenant. He holds all these things within him. The God who could not be contained lived among us and was in some way contained in this living body of Jesus, which now contains all things and fills all things. All of this is very Johannine sort of thought here, that he's in us and we're in him, and it's a circle. But yeah, Jesus is the new mercy seat. Tyree.
I really like how you focus on the body on this one. I think the incarnational aspect is really important. Like, reading this year is really, like, that's what sets it apart. Like, and I think this is a really good connection to what Jesus said a lot about the law, where it says, like, the law says, but I say, the law says, but I say. And also, when people accused him of saying, oh, you're here to upset the law, and he's like, no, I'm here to complete it. This is, like a literal connection of saying, like, no, but I am this thing, right? The Ark of the Covenant contained the law. And this symbol, with the same angels and the same, coffin shape that the Ark was, it's like, but it's his body that is the law, and it's his life that's the law, and it's his resurrection that's the law that's kind of taking it to this next level. I think like one of the things that keeps popping out to me, you know, with each time we read the parables or the miracles or anything, it's like for Jesus, the actual medium of his body and his life is the message. And this is just a great way to show that.
Yeah, nicely said, thank you. We'll take that just a step further. What's another word for law? There's the old law or old covenant, and then there's the new covenant. The new covenant does not abolish the old covenant, it fulfills it and takes us with it. This is the ultimate fulfillment of the new covenant, the assumption of the old covenant, or old law. The other thing that you said, Tyree, that I think is, that jogged something for me that's really important, the body, incarnation. John is so adamant that you understand that Jesus had a real body, that while he was God, he was also fully man. And when I say that the Gnostic Gospels did not make it in, the reason that most of them didn't make it in is because they denied one of those things. They thought spirit good, body bad. Jesus, though, was all of it. And John goes to great lengths to make sure that you know that when he's resurrected, he's not just a floaty spirit, he has an actual body. He eats fish with people on the beach. Ghosts can't do that. Bodies can. It's a renewed body, who knows, it still bears the marks, but John is really, really clear that in this new economy of God, body, spirit, all redeemed in that.
I'm so glad I heard you say that, because if you answered a question, have a simple prayer that Christ in resurrected body. When I need to call him right now, say, I am just holy lamb, held in the arms of the great I am. And it lets me know that I'm safe in his arms.
Yeah.
When you think about that, it's really deep, really fast.
Yeah.
Arms, wait.
Yeah.
But it's a mirror.
Yeah. Let me move us forward a little bit. Let me bring it a little more deeply into our life right now. Broken things and the space between. Part of what John is claiming, part of what Father Lonnie is claiming is God loves broken things. God works through broken things. God has always been the kind of God to fill in the space in between rather than the shiny object here or the shiny object here. So in terms of broken things in the life of this church, so there's this. Most of you have heard the news, I'm sure. Total accident. Life is a frenzy at St. John's on Easter or on Holy Saturday, the day before Easter. If you come by here, there are ladies putting flowers together. There are sextons vacuuming the pews. There are rehearsals going on, rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal. Likewise, the Monday and Tuesday after Easter, we're taking all that stuff down. And our font, which has been here since 1856, I think, if I'm remembering right, it got knocked. And the font has always been in three pieces. There's the base, the pillar, and then the bowl. Those three pieces have been wobbly forever. One of my first baptisms was J.J. Griffiths. And I remember Kristen Griffiths right there after I had, preached about how wobbly that font was. JJ was kind of running around and poor Kristen looked like she was about to lose her mind. It has just been wobbly for a long time because the old girl has had some wear and tear over the last almost 2 centuries. This was always going to happen at some point. And so somebody accidentally knocked it. I show up, I didn't know about it, and somebody was like, do you need a hug? Are you okay? What are you even talking about? I'm like, always, yes. But, and then they told me, and I was like, okay, but I think this is going to be all right. So Linda Scott, is Linda in here? I don't think she is. She immediately came up to me and she said, well, We have the Master Craftsman program, and we know those folks who are over there. I bet if we call them, they'll come immediately and start figuring out how to put it back together. And when that happened, they came. I came to meet them. I took a picture with my phone, and it did not hit me until I started to put this lesson together, what was in that picture. Almost as if bending angel, yeah? And God in the crack in between. Y'all, we're gonna be okay. Nobody has, called and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe." What everybody has said is, "Oh, I'm just glad it wasn't me." And the person who it was is okay. They are okay, and they know that they are loved beyond measure. I've made that very clear. And I also told them, they were like, "Well, this base is wobbly." I was like, "Yeah, so thank God for small favors. We're finally having a reason to get it fixed." So it's all gonna come together. But then a couple of you also sent me this idea, and I can't remember and pronounce the name, but it's Japanese art form.
Yes.
Kintsugi, am I close?
Yes.
This Japanese art form where they'll take broken things and they fill the cracks with gold. And it's not just a repair of the old thing, it's that the old thing is made new and in some way is more beautiful than the thing that it was. Well, y'all, this is just good resurrection theology. This is Jesus's body resurrected with the nail print still in his hand, but in a glorious body that can come and hug you when you need him in your prayer, And so at some point, we'll get the bowl of the font back, all will be restored, and those guys are so good that you're probably not even going to see the cracks in it. But even if you do, it's part of the story. And it makes me think about the fact that Christ is right now seated at the right hand of the Father, corporeally present because he ascended in his body in heaven with his nail prints and that spear print in his side. The cracks are still there. God worked through the broken things to bring about redemption and grace. Yes, ma'am.
The thing that makes me feel good is we're all cracked bowls.
Exactly.
And so that really makes me feel good.
We're all just a bunch of crackpots, just trying to figure it out. And he's working through all that. That is what grace is. The reason you hear me preach about grace over and over and over is because you're exactly right. We're all broken, and that is not something he holds against us. It's something for which he's able to shine.
And the healing there of the gold, it is like the spirit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. So there's one other place where something gets broken in the service, and it's my final word, and I'll let us go. Every Sunday, something gets broken in the middle of church. What is it?
Bread.
So this is rich with all kinds of sacramental symbolism. This is Christ's body broken for you. This is the bread being broken to be given to you, the disciples. But the very first time I ever started thinking about this whole God and the space in between and God loving broken things was when I read a sermon years ago by Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. And in that sermon, he compared that with the angels on the Ark of the Covenant. That when we break it, you're not just supposed to be focused on this piece of bread here and this piece of bread here, the thing that's been broken for you. I swear, really, I've had goosebumps through this whole thing. You're also supposed to acknowledge the thing that is in between, which is the space of the God who cannot be contained. And yet the God who cannot be contained has deigned to come and be incarnate with us, not just in Jesus, but in the incarnate sacramental presence of the bread. So that space in between is also the God who gets placed in the palm of your hand and incorporated into who you are. This is the only place in the entire prayer book that mandates silence. If you ever look at the little rubric, it says a period of silence is kept. We should actually probably wait a couple beats longer before the choir begins the fraction anthem. It's always easy to kind of jump to it, but really it's supposed to be break, behold. And now, alleluia, Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. So on Sundays, all through the year, when you come to church and we're at this moment, I want you to look up and I want you, don't look at the face of the priest in between. Just behold the space in between. Think about the space between those two angels of the Ark of the Covenant. Think about that space of the empty tomb between those two angels. Think about all the spaces and the cracks in your heart and in your soul and in your body. And know that the God of broken things is filling them completely. And that is all I have to say about that. Now let us go fill the space in our bellies before the Baptists beat us to the buffet.